Well, that's a very good question, because we are actually at war, but not in ways that people immediately understand. Meaning, there aren't bombs dropping in London, there are bombs dropping in Kyiv, and there are rockets being fired at Tel Aviv. So we're in a world war of many different theatres simultaneously, and many different modes of warfare. So for hot war, the two examples I gave already, we have Ukraine and Israel, who are both on the front line of the free world. And people watching should really clear their minds. They should have no illusions. These two countries are fighting their battles, but they are fighting for us as well. Because if they falter, if they were to fail, God forbid, and if it were to happen because of lack of support from the rest of the free world, and I'm using the old-fashioned language again, then we will find that we may be facing directly kinetic warfare, as it's often called, which means throwing hot metal around and explosives. And the next target, and the one which has most importantly to be deterred, familiar to many of your watchers, I'm sure, is Xi Jinping's often stated ambition to achieve what he calls the reunification of Taiwan by the 100th anniversary. And if he isn't successfully deterred, then he may well have a pop at Taiwan. So that's hot war. But what makes this complicated for people, I think, is that that's not the only form of warfare. People often think that it is. You know, it's like watching war films from the Second World War. That's only 1/3. The second is Cold War, and Cold War is largely economic. And here, we in the capitalist free market societies, because that's what we are, we depend crucially upon the smooth running and interlinkage of world trade. And we are threatened at every point by Russia, by Iran, and by China. In many ways, Iran is the forgotten one in this, because if you think of it like a telephone exchange, Iran is really the center of the telephone exchange, because all the lines to Russia and to China, and of course to their proxies, the Houthi and Hezbollah and Hamas and so on, they all go back to an exchange in Tehran with the shaky regime of the Ayatollahs. And so there is economic warfare against us being conducted in all sorts of ways. And one of the ways bleeds into the third form of warfare which we are engaged in. And this is, by the way, not a matter of choice. This is a choice of our enemies. Our choice is whether or not we understand that this is what's happening. The third form is often described as grey warfare. And this is a mixture of information warfare, and that can be conducted by propaganda. It's also conducted by subversion, by introducing, for example, very large numbers of Chinese researchers who, it turns out, in some rather worrying research done by the now director of the Legatum Foundation, Radomir Teilkut, he tracked down Chinese researchers within the British defense research establishments where I used to work, and he found them in the most extraordinary secure places. Right. He found Chinese researcher working inside the most secure facility in the atomic weapons research establishment where we design our nuclear warheads. So human penetration, very old-fashioned spies, basically. And then on top of that, of course, very sophisticated electronic warfare, which means hacking, very sophisticated hacking. It means in these days deep fakes. It means artificial intelligence. How many of Generation Z really understand what's happening when they're dancing their silly little dances on TikTok, for example? You probably know, but many viewers perhaps don't, why TikTok was set up. Because what TikTok is providing back to China are millions, perhaps billions of Caucasian facial images on which the Chinese can train their AI and surveillance systems, just as they have done on Asian faces already in China. So you're actually providing a resource to possibly our most potent global antagonist. So if you wrap all of that together, you have a multimodal, multi-theater global conflict